Everyone feared the dog in cage 17. Staff members would walk past quickly, eyes averted. Volunteers refused to enter. Even the director, a woman who had rehabilitated hundreds of aggressive animals, shook her head whenever his name appeared on the daily report. The German Shepherd had been there for 8 months, and in that time, not a single person had managed to touch him without drawing blood. His amber eyes burned with something darker than rage, something closer to despair. The shelter board had made their decision. Thursday morning, that's when it would happen. The veterinarian had already been notified, the form signed, the quiet room prepared. It was the humane thing to do, they said. Some dogs were too broken to save. But none of them knew that on Wednesday afternoon, a little girl with clouded eyes and a worn backpack would walk through those doors. And none of them could have predicted what would happen when she asked, in her small, steady voice, to meet the dog that nobody wanted. The Riverside Animal Shelter sat at the edge of town, where the streets turned to gravel and hope came in short supply. It was a place of second chances, though not all stories ended well. Sarah Mitchell, the shelter director, had learned long ago that love alone couldn't save every animal. Some carried wounds too deep, traumas that transformed trust into terror. The dog in cage 17 had arrived on a winter night, dragged in by animal control. His previous owner had been arrested, the house condemned. Neighbors reported hearing the dog's howls through paper-thin walls, saw him chained in the yard during snowstorms, watched as he grew thinner, wilder, more unreachable. When the officers finally cut through the padlock, they found him surrounded by his own waste, ribs visible beneath matted fur, and eyes that held nothing but survival instinct. They named him Gunner. It seemed fitting. He attacked everything that moved. The intake veterinarian needed 3 assistants and a sedative just to complete the initial exam. Scars covered his body, some old, some fresh. His teeth were broken from chewing metal chains. Every touch triggered a violent response, every voice a snarl. Sarah had tried everything. Professional trainers spent weeks attempting to reach him. They used treats, patience, distance work, calming music. Nothing penetrated the wall he'd built. He would sit in the back corner of his cage, trembling and growling simultaneously, a creature caught between fight and flight with nowhere to go. The shelter was his prison, and he was his own worst enemy. Meanwhile, across town, Emma Rodriguez was learning to navigate a world that had recently gone dark. At 8 years old, she had lost her sight to a rare condition that doctors couldn't reverse. Her parents watched helplessly as their vibrant, dancing daughter retreated inward, spending hours sitting silently in her room, running her fingers over books she could no longer read. Her therapist suggested an emotional support animal. Sometimes, Dr. Chun explained gently, healing doesn't come from seeing more clearly. It comes from feeling more deeply. Emma's mother, Maria, was skeptical. How could a dog help when her daughter wouldn't even leave the house? But desperation is a powerful motivator. And so on that Wednesday afternoon, Maria loaded Emma into the car and drove to Riverside. "I want to meet the saddest dog you have," Emma said to Sarah when they arrived. Her small hand gripped her white cane. Her face turned toward the symphony of barks echoing through the shelter. The one that needs someone the most. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Maria, who shrugged helplessly. "She's been saying that all week. I don't know where she got the idea." "Sweetheart," Sarah knelt down, her voice gentle. "We have lots of wonderful dogs here. Let me show you some friendly ones in the adoption area." "No." Emma's voice was quiet but firm. "You're hiding one. I can feel it. There's a dog here that everyone is scared of." She tilted her head, listening to the cacophony of sounds. "That one. The one that's not barking." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. How could this child possibly know? Gunner's cage was around the corner, out of sight. And she was right. While every other dog in the shelter barked and howled for attention, cage 17 remained silent except for the occasional low growl. "Emma, I can't let you meet that dog," Sarah said carefully. "Ease," He's not ready for visitors. Is he the saddest? Sarah closed her eyes. Yes, he's the saddest. Then he's the one I need to meet. Something in the child's voice made Sarah pause. There was no fear in it, no hesitation, just certainty. She looked at Maria again, who seemed torn between protecting her daughter and honoring her request. Finally, Sarah made a decision that went against every protocol in her manual. Wait here, she told them. She walked to cage 17 with her heart hammering. Gunnar was in his usual position, back corner, body tensed, eyes tracking her every movement. Listen, boy, she whispered through the bars. I'm about to do something crazy. There's a little girl who wants to meet you. She can't see you, so she won't be scared of you. But I need you to understand something. If you hurt her, that's it. That's the end for both of us. The dog's lip curled, revealing broken teeth. But something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been curiosity or might have been exhaustion. Sarah couldn't tell which. She returned to the front desk and laid out strict rules. Emma would approach the cage slowly. She would not reach through the bars. She would not make sudden movements. At the first sign of aggression, they would leave immediately. Maria signed a liability waiver with shaking hands. They walked down the corridor, Emma's cane tapping against concrete. With each step, Sarah questioned her judgment. But they had already reached cage 17. There was no turning back now. He's here, Sarah said softly. Right in front of you, behind the bars. Emma stood perfectly still, her head tilted toward the cage. Gunnar, for the first time in months, stood up, not in aggression, but in attention. Hello, Emma said. Just that. One word, barely a whisper. The shelter fell silent. Every dog stopped barking at once, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Gunnar took one step forward, then another. His tail wasn't wagging. It hung low, uncertain. But he wasn't growling either. Emma slowly lowered herself to the ground, sitting cross-legged on the cold floor. I know you're scared, she said. I'm scared too. I can't see anything anymore. Everything is dark all the time. People try to help, but they don't understand. They can see, so they think I'm missing something. But maybe I'm not missing it. Maybe I'm just finding it differently. Sarah watched in stunned silence. Gunnar had moved to the front of the cage now, his massive head just inches from the bars. He was staring at Emma with an intensity that should have been terrifying, but somehow wasn't. I heard them talking, Emma continued, her voice still soft. The lady at the desk. She didn't know I could hear, but I have really good ears now. She said tomorrow is your last day. She said you're too broken. Emma paused, and a tear rolled down her cheek. They say that about me too. At school. That I'm too broken to be fixed. Gunnar whined. It was the first sound he'd made besides growling in 8 months. A high, thin sound of recognition. Of shared pain. But I don't think you're broken, Emma said. I think you're just hurt. There's a difference. She slowly extended her hand toward the bars, palm up. I won't hurt you. I promise. Emma, no. Maria started forward, but Sarah grabbed her arm. Wait, Sarah breathed. Just wait. Gunnar looked at the small hand reaching toward him. Every instinct screamed danger. Every memory shouted betrayal. But this voice was different. This presence carried no threat, no dominance, no ulterior motive. Just understanding. Slowly, trembling with the effort of fighting his own fear, Gunnar stretched his neck forward. His nose touched Emma's fingertips. The contact lasted less than a second before he jumped back, but it had happened. The impossible had happened. Emma smiled. I knew you were still in there. Sarah canceled the euthanasia that evening, marking Gunnar's file with a single word, pending. She didn't know what she was pending him for. The board would demand answers. The insurance company would raise concerns. The staff would question her sanity. But she had witnessed something that defied logic, and she needed to understand it. Emma returned the next day, and the day after that. Each afternoon after school, Maria would drive her daughter to the shelter, and Emma would sit outside cage 17, talking to Gunnar in her quiet, steady voice. She told him about her life before the darkness, about dancing and painting and reading books under her covers with a flashlight. She told them about her fears, her nightmares, her anger at a world that had stolen her sight. And slowly, incrementally, Gunnar began to respond. On day 3, he ate food while she was present, something he'd only done alone before. On day 5, he lay down within reach of the bars, close enough that Emma could hear his breathing. On day 7, he allowed her to touch his paw through the bars, just for a moment, before pulling away. The shelter staff watched in amazement. Dr. Peterson, the veterinarian who had been scheduled to perform the euthanasia, came to observe. "I've never seen anything like this," she admitted. "It's as if she's speaking a language he understands." "She is," Sarah said, "the language of shared trauma." But progress wasn't linear. On day 9, a volunteer accidentally dropped a metal bowl near Gunnar's cage. The clang sent him into a rage, and he threw himself against the bars with such force that the entire structure shook. Emma didn't flinch. She simply began singing, a soft lullaby her grandmother had taught her. Duerme, duerme negrito, que tu mama esta en el campo. The Spanish words floated through the air, and something extraordinary happened. Gunnar stopped mid-attack. He stood frozen, sides heaving, foam flecking his lips. Then, slowly, he sank to the ground and covered his face with his paws, a gesture so human, so vulnerable, that Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "His previous owner," she said suddenly. Animal control mentioned she was Latina. She had family pictures on the wall. Maybe before everything went wrong, she sang to him. Emma kept singing, her voice steady and pure. Gunnar's breathing gradually slowed, and when she finished, he crawled forward and pressed his head against the bars, as close to her as the metal would allow. "I know," Emma whispered, reaching through to rest her hand on his scarred head. He didn't pull away. "I know it hurts to remember the good things, but we have to remember them. Otherwise, we forget who we were before we got broken." By the end of week 2, Gunnar would eat from Emma's hand through the bars. By week 3, he followed her voice as she walked around the cage, his eyes tracking her every movement with something that was beginning to look like trust. The shelter staff started calling it the miracle in cage 17. But Sarah knew the real test was still coming. Emma couldn't visit through bars forever. Eventually, if this was going to work, someone would have to open that cage door. The decision came on a rainy Saturday morning. Emma had been visiting for exactly 30 days. Sarah gathered her staff in the office and laid out a proposal that made half of them pale. "I want to let Emma into the cage." The room erupted. It was reckless, dangerous, potentially fatal. What if Gunnar snapped? What if the connection they'd built shattered the moment the barrier disappeared? Sarah let them voice every concern, then quietly said, "What if it doesn't?" Dr. Chun, Emma's therapist, attended the meeting. She had been coming weekly to observe the interactions, documenting what she called mutual healing through shared vulnerability. Now she spoke up. "Emma's been preparing for this. She knows the risks. She wants to try." Maria was the hardest to convince. She had already lost her daughter's sight. The thought of losing more was unbearable. But Emma, sitting in the corner with her hand resting on her service cane, spoke up in her clear, unwavering voice. "Mom, I know you're scared, but I need you to trust me. Gunnar won't hurt me. He understands what I understand, that we're the same. We've both been locked away. We've both been told we're not good enough. We've both forgotten what it feels like to be safe." She paused. "I want to show him what safe feels like." They prepared like surgeons before a critical operation. The staff blocked off the entire wing. Dr. Peterson stood by with a tranquilizer gun she prayed she wouldn't need. Sarah triple-checked every lock, every protocol. Emma wore protective clothing, though she had protested that it would scare Gunnar. They compromised. She could wear her regular clothes, but staff would be positioned just outside the cage. Emma stood before cage 17 for the last time with bars between them. "Are you ready?" she asked the dog softly. Gunnar's tail moved. Not a wag, Not yet, but a small, tentative movement that held the promise of one. Sarah's hand shook as she unlocked the door. The metal creaked. Gunner's ears flattened briefly, then perked forward again. He was scared, but he was fighting his fear. Just like Emma. The door swung open. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Emma took one step forward, then another. She was inside the cage now, vulnerable and exposed, with a dog that had nearly killed 3 handlers. Every instinct screamed at Sarah to pull her back, but she forced herself to remain still. Emma knelt down, slowly, gracefully. "I'm here," she said. "I'm really here." Gunner stood frozen, his body rigid with conflicting impulses. Then, as if moving through water, he took one step toward her. Another. Another. He was close enough now that Emma could feel his breath on her face. Close enough to kill her with a single bite. Instead, Gunner did something he hadn't done in over 3 years. He lowered his massive head and rested it in Emma's lap. The weight of it, the trust of it, the absolute surrender of it. It broke something open in the room. Maria started crying. Dr. Peterson wiped her eyes. Sarah had to turn away. Emma wrapped her arms around Gunner's neck, and he didn't pull away. "I've got you," she whispered into his fur. "You're safe now. We're both safe now." For the first time since the darkness took her vision, Emma Rodriguez felt whole. And for the first time since chains had stolen his dignity, Gunner felt home. The adoption papers were signed 3 weeks later. Gunner, who Emma renamed Luz, Spanish for light, went home with the Rodriguez family. Dr. Chun documented their progress for the next year, watching as the girl who couldn't see and the dog who couldn't trust taught each other how to live again. Luz became Emma's certified service dog, but their relationship transcended utility. He guided her through crowds, yes, but she guided him through his nightmares. When he woke up trembling from memories of chains, she would sing to him in Spanish until he calmed. When she felt overwhelmed by her darkness, he would press against her until the world felt manageable again. They learned Braille together, Emma reading with her fingers while Luz learned to recognize the sound of pages turning as his cue to rest. They walked to school together, 2 beings who had been deemed too broken, now moving through the world as one unbreakable unit. Sarah kept a photo on her desk. Emma at her 5th grade graduation, Luz sitting beside her in a service vest, his tail finally wagging, his eyes finally soft. She showed it to every volunteer who doubted whether difficult animals could be saved. Sometimes, she would say, healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about finding someone who's broken in the same places. The shelter eventually developed a program called Luz's Legacy, pairing traumatized children with traumatized animals under careful supervision. The success rate astounded everyone. It turned out that brokenness recognized brokenness, and together, they could forge something stronger than either could build alone. Emma is 17 now, preparing for college. Luz is graying around the muzzle, slower on walks, but still devoted. When people ask her about him, she says the same thing every time. Everyone thought he needed to be fixed, but he didn't need fixing. He needed to be seen, not with eyes, but with understanding. Maybe that's what we all need. Maybe love isn't about perfection. Maybe it's about recognizing our scars in someone else and saying, I know that hurt. Let's heal it together. Maybe it's about opening the cage,